500,000 people. That was the number of lives separated by a single stroke of a sword and the ashes left in the place of Westeros's greatest city. Jaime Lannister drove his blade into the Mad King's back, and the world pretended nothing out of the ordinary had happened. They called him the Kingslayer, spat at his feet, and moved on. But just think, what if Jaime had lowered his sword? What if, that night in the throne room, he had remained true to the oath he had sworn? Wildfire is set alight. 500,000 people are burned alive, along with Tywin's army, which has just entered the city. There is no Red Keep, no Iron Throne, no Lannisters, as Westeros knew them, and Robert Baratheon wins the war, only to find that his victory has turned into a wasteland. Today we'll follow this chain of events right to the end, because the consequences go far deeper than they seem at first glance. Before devising an alternative, you need to understand exactly what happened. You need to understand every single detail, because that's where the devil lies. The 283rd year since the conquest, the end of the Usurpers' War. Following Robert Baratheon's decisive victory at the Battle of the Trident, the rebel army marches on King's Landing. Aerys II Targaryen, the Mad King, realizes he has lost. Rhaegar is dead. Most of the great houses have either gone over to the enemy's side or are maintaining neutrality. But we need to understand exactly what sort of man Aerys had become by this point. Not simply mad. That is too convenient a label, one that obscures important details. A man who, in his youth, was sensible enough to be called a just ruler, and charming enough to recruit Tywin Lannister as his hand. But years of paranoia, favorites whispering of conspiracies, and several genuine acts of treason had shaped a worldview for Aerys in which enemies were everywhere. He burned lords. He burned his own men. He burned those who dared to disagree. He said that fire cleanses. He said that fire is beautiful. The ignition of each new execution aroused him in a way that nothing of the sort aroused a normal person. It is important to understand this, because that is precisely why wildfire was not merely a weapon to him. It was the ultimate form of his existence. And just then, Tywin Lannister approaches the gates. Lord Casterly Rock, the richest man in Westeros, with an army of 10,000 swords. He says he has come to defend the city. Varys warns, do not believe him. Jaime warns, do not believe him. Master Pycelle advises opening the gates. Aerys listens to Pycelle. Robert has not yet reached the capital. Tywin had the chance to choose the victor at the last moment, and he took it. The Lannisters enter and start a massacre. It was at this very moment that the Mad King finally lost touch with reality. He ordered Jaime to bring him the head of Tywin, his own Lord Father, and at the same time, he commanded the chief alchemist, Rossart, set it alight. For years, thousands of jars of wildfire had been stockpiled beneath King's Landing, beneath the great sept of Baelor, beneath the slums of Flea Bottom, beneath the stables and taverns, even beneath the Red Keep itself. There would be enough to reduce an entire city to ashes. Aerys believed that the fire would not kill him, but transform him into a dragon. He bellowed, "Burn them all," and awaited his rebirth from the flames. It is worth adding that there were several key arsonists who knew the locations of all the caches and the sequence in which they were to be set alight. Rossart was the leader, but there were also Bellis and Garrigus. In the canon, after the murder of Aerys, Jaime personally hunted down all three and killed them. That is precisely why information about the caches was almost entirely lost, and subsequent generations found individual jugs by chance, beneath the Great Sept, beneath the Dragon Pit. It was no coincidence that Cersei was able to make use of part of the supplies 15 years after her father's death. They were simply lying there, waiting. Jaime killed Rossart before he could pass on the order. Then, he killed Aerys. Ned Stark entered the throne room and saw the Kingslayer sitting on the Iron Throne above the body of the king he had slain. He judged Jaime on the spot, without words, without explanation. And Jaime, whether out of pride or weariness, made no attempt to explain. And so history remembered him as a traitor. Now let's remove that blow. What happens if Jaime sheathes his sword and allows Rossart to carry out the order? This is a specific turning point. A single moment, a single choice. and the consequences that flow from it will rewrite the entire history of Westeros. The first few minutes after Rhassart leaves the throne room seem almost peaceful. Jaime stands beside Aerys. The Mad King stares into the fire and smiles. He awaits his rebirth. Meanwhile, somewhere in the underground tunnels beneath the city, the first jug is set alight. Very few manage to grasp what is happening. The alchemists worked in secret. Even most of the pyromancers themselves did not know the full picture. The first explosions ring out near Blosheny Konets, in the poorest neighborhoods. Then the fire reaches the stockpiles beneath the city gates. Each of them had been placed there specifically with this in mind. Once the gates are ablaze, there is no escape. Tywin's army has just entered the city. 10,000 Lannister swords have only just begun the slaughter when the ground beneath them literally explodes. Wildfire burns at a temperature that water cannot extinguish. It clings to flesh, to metal, to stone. It burns for a long time. 10,000 soldiers find themselves trapped between burning walls and burning gates. Most of them do not have time to realize what has happened. Wildfire becomes increasingly unstable with age. Some vials, having survived the initial explosion, detonate from the shockwave before the alchemists can reach them. A chain reaction. The stockpiles beneath Dragon Pit explode with such force that they bring down the structure itself. The stockpiles beneath Red Keep turn the main stronghold of Westeros into a mass grave for all who have taken refuge within it. Tywin Lannister dies in King's Landing. Let's stop there. This is not merely the death of yet another commander. It is the end of the most fearsome political player Westeros has produced in the last 100 years, a man who wanted his name to strike terror even into the dead. The end of a dynasty, as he himself had built it. Because without Tywin, House Lannister will very quickly become something quite different. But this is only the first wave of consequences, because Royal Harbor continues to burn, 500,000 people. That is what Jaime himself says in the canon, explaining why he killed Aerys. 500,000 lives inhabited the capital. In our version, they all perish. Merchants, servants, peasants, children, septons, guards. The great sept of Baelor collapses in a cloud of emerald flame. The Red Keep, with its towers and secret passages, with the Iron Throne in the throne room, burns to the ground. The red-hot metal of hundreds of swords, melted into the throne by Aegon the Conqueror, melts and flows across the floor. The Iron Throne ceases to exist. Robert Baratheon emerges victorious from the war, and with it comes a wasteland. So, let's take stock of the losses so far. Tywin is dead. The entire Lannister army, 10,000 swords, has been wiped out. 500,000 inhabitants of the capital have perished. The Red Keep and the Iron Throne no longer exist. Cersei Lannister, assuming Robert has not yet managed to betroth himself to her, will not marry the new king because she lacks what might make such a union attractive, namely, a father and the gold of Casterly Rock. And Jaime is alive and well, with both hands intact. And a knight of the Kingsguard who did not kill the king is held in far greater esteem than the one everyone calls the Kingslayer. From this point onwards, the story begins to unfold in several different directions. Let's look at each one. Firstly, Robert and the Iron Throne. In the canon, Robert arrived in King's Landing, saw Aerys' body, sat upon the Iron Throne, and declared himself king. In our version, he arrives at the ruins. There is no throne. There is no symbol of power around which Westeros has been built for 300 years. There is no capital in the usual sense, only the smell of burnt flesh and melted stone for miles around. Robert has won the war, but he has nowhere to sit. This is of fundamental importance. In Martin's universe, the Iron Throne is not merely a chair. It represents legitimacy. It is a symbol that has united the 7 kingdoms under a single rule for 300 years. Without it, Robert must figure out how to rebuild his authority from the ruins, both literally and figuratively. And this is where his character comes into play. Robert Baratheon hated governing. In the canon, with the Iron Throne and an established system of power, he rather quickly turned into a drunkard who preferred hunting to the affairs of state. Now, he must not merely govern, but build, establish a new capital, or relocate the seat of power to Storm's End. to persuade the Great Lords to accept the legitimacy of the new house, to resolve the issue with Dorne, which the Lannisters had offended by murdering Elia Martell and her children, and the Lannisters are no longer there to bear the responsibility, to channel his grief over Lyanna Stark into administrative decisions. Robert was not cut out for this, and in our version, this becomes apparent very quickly. The second scenario, the Lannisters without Tywin. In the canon, Tywin only dies in the 4th book, struck down by his son's bolt. Until then, House Lannister is held together by his iron will, his political talents, and his gold. Without him, Cersei rules less effectively, Joffrey turns into a petty tyrant, and the system begins to crumble. In our version, Tywin dies even before Robert's reign begins. Jaime becomes the heir to Casterly Rock, but Jaime has taken the oath of the Kingsguard, which means, by tradition, he cannot inherit lands or titles. This raises an interesting question. In the canon, it was Aerys who inducted Jaime into the Kingsguard, partly to deprive Tywin of an heir. In our version, Tywin died at King's Landing. Is Jaime free from his oath? Can the new king release him? Probably yes. Robert needs allies, and the Lannisters without Tywin are allies who can easily be brought to heel. But Casterly Rock will be ruled by Jaime, a man who has fought, not ruled, a man who grew up in his father's shadow. In this world, Cersei remains at Casterly Rock, and, in all likelihood, does not become queen. This is because, in the canon, the alliance between the Baratheons and the Lannisters was based on Tywin offering Robert gold and political support in exchange for the throne for his daughter. Tywin is no longer around. The Lannisters' gold hasn't gone anywhere. The mines at Casterly Rock are still operating, but there is no negotiator. Jaime is not the sort of man who knows how to bargain over marriages. This changes everything for the next generation. If Robert doesn't marry Cersei, he won't have any children like Joffrey. He'll have his bastards by various women, whom he may or may not acknowledge. The question of succession becomes a pressing issue very early on. But wait, because there is a third factor, and it throws the calculations off course more than anything else. Stannis Baratheon, he's the character who gets the least attention in this alternative history, and that's a shame. In the canon, Stannis is given Dragonstone, a fortress on an island that historically belonged to the Targaryens. Robert never once explained to him why. Stannis regarded it as a punishment, although Martin, through the authors of A Song of Ice and Fire, hinted that no, it was done precisely for the heir. But that is not the point. The point is that, in the canon, Stannis received the fortress, remained on the fringes of power, and ran it in silence, with resentment and anger, for 17 years. In our version, there is no Red Keep, nor is King's Landing the seat of power. Stannis holds Storm's End, one of the largest and strongest strongholds in Westeros. Robert needs a temporary residence, whilst a new capital is being built somewhere. Perhaps on the same site, perhaps not. If power moves to Storm's End, Stannis transforms from a disgraced heir into one of the key players. His position changes fundamentally, and this is where Stannis' character begins to take a different turn. In the original story, he was furious that he was never given his fair share. In our version, he has a real chance to take on the role he believes he deserved, his brother's right-hand man, ruling half the kingdom from Storm's End, whilst Robert goes off hunting and drinking. But there's a catch here too. Stannis, undefeated, unhumiliated, and without Melisandre at this point in time, is a different man. His resentment hasn't had time to build up. A lord who hasn't been passed over for the throne twice is far more dangerous and far more effective than one who has been humiliated for 17 years running. Speaking of Melisandre, the Red Priestess approaches Stannis in the canon precisely because he is desperately seeking support, a way to legitimize his claim with something greater than simply, "I am the king's brother." In our version, Stannis, who has held a firm position at court from the very beginning, may not encounter the Red Faith at such a moment and under such circumstances at all. This means that Melisandre either fails to find her way to him, or her influence over him is far less significant. All the religious fanaticism, the burnings at the stake, the sacrifice of Shireen, none of it may simply happen. Now let's bring Dorne into the picture. And this is where things really start to get serious. In the canon, the murder of Elia Martell and her children, carried out on Tywin's orders, weighed heavily on relations between Dorne and the crown. Dorne never fully recognized Robert as their king. Oberyn Martell attended the Red Wedding not to celebrate, but to seek justice. In our version, Tywin is dead, consumed by fire. He was killed by his own greed and betrayal, for it was his army that entered the city and ran into the wildfire. There is no one to judge. There is no one to hold accountable. Elia and her children are dead anyway, killed by Lorcor and Gora before the fire reached the Red Keep. In this version, Dorne is not merely offended. In this version, Dorne demands war. The Mountain is alive in our version. He took part in the massacre before the explosion and may well have survived. One of Elia's murderers is still walking the earth. He is a specific target for hatred. Oberyn Martell, who in the canon sought justice against the Mountain in a duel, has no legal system in our version through which to legally secure such a duel, because there is no such system as yet. And Robert, who has nothing to offer them since Tywin is already dead, and the Lannisters are virtually non-existent as a political force, finds himself in a very awkward position. He could declare that the murderers have been punished by perishing in the same fire. Prince Doran Martell would accept this. Oberyn Martell, the younger brother, a vindictive and hot-headed man, will not. So, at this point, Tywin is dead. The Lannisters are weakened and in need of a reorganization. Robert is in power, but without a capital and without the Iron Throne. Stannis has grown stronger. Dorne is on the brink of open conflict. And we haven't even got to the main issue yet. What is Aerys doing? Or rather, what happens to him in our version? In the canon, Jaime kills him before the fire has a chance to set anything alight apart from the first few jugs. In our version, Aerys is alive at the moment of the explosions. He is waiting for his transformation into a dragon. He stands in the throne room and shouts, "Burn them all!" And the fire comes. The Red Keep is burning, along with everything else. Aerys perishes in the very flames he himself had summoned. What awaited him was not a metamorphosis, but simply death. A death as agonizing as those he had inflicted upon others. But he is not the only Targaryen to die in the Citadel. Rhaella Targaryen, his wife, who, in the canon, survived and died in childbirth on Dragonstone, is also in the capital. She is pregnant with Daenerys. In our version, her fate hinges on a single question. Did anyone manage to get her out before the explosions? In the canon, Sir Willem Darry takes Varys and the newborn Daenerys from Dragonstone to Essos after Rhaella's death. In our version, the events unfold differently. Either Rhaella dies alongside Aerys, and Daenerys is never born at all, or she is taken away before the explosions, in which case Daenerys is born elsewhere, and under different circumstances. This is a key decision point within our alternative. Let's examine both options. If Daenerys is never born, or is stillborn, then the story lacks that dragonborn threat from the east which has loomed over the canon throughout. Varys, who is only a few years old, survives, most likely taken away by Sir Darry himself. He grows up in Essos and lays claim to the crown, but without his sister and her dragons, he has no military power. The Targaryens fade away as a threat, slowly and sadly. If Rhaella survived and Daenerys was born, then the story of the Mother of Dragons begins differently. Her birth is not shrouded in the ashes of a burnt-out capital, a fate she will unwittingly repeat some 30-odd years later. Her father was consumed by his own fire. This is not perceived as martyrdom, as it was in the canon amongst some Targaryen loyalists. It is perceived as just retribution, and so Daenerys has a different attitude towards her own legacy. If Daenerys does indeed sail to Westeros with her dragons 35 years from now, she will be arriving in a different world. There is no Iron Throne, which was bequeathed to her. There is no Red Keep, where she had dreamed of sitting since childhood. The symbols around which her identity was built have long since been wiped from the face of the earth. But the most interesting part happens even earlier, even before Daenerys has had a chance to grow up. No Tywin, no Lannisters to act as a stabilizing force, no Iron Throne to symbolize legitimacy, no official capital. Robert is on the throne, but which one exactly? This is the state in which the new kingdom finds itself in its early years. In the canon, Robert ruled relatively peacefully for 17 years. There was one significant uprising, the Greyjoy Rebellion in the year 289. The rest of the time, it was quiet. Tywin provided gold and political leverage. Lord John Arryn kept the system running like a well-oiled machine. Cersei did not love Robert, but she observed the formalities out of fear of her father. None of that features in our version. Robert without Tywin is Robert without the Lannisters' financial backing. The Westerosi treasury was already in a sorry state by the end of Aerys' reign. The war had depleted it even further, and now there is the added burden of building a new capital. Robert begins to borrow money. From whom? From the Iron Bank of Braavos. And he falls into the same trap, only more quickly than in the canon. The Greyjoy Rebellion will take place in our version too. In the canon, Balon Greyjoy raised the rebellion when he decided the time was right. The new kingdom had not yet consolidated its power. In our version, the moment comes even sooner. King's Landing lies in ruins. Robert has no Tywin to finance the suppression. Stannis can help with his fleet, but he will demand something in return. This is no longer simply the suppression of a rebellion. It is a negotiation. It involves debts and conditions. And in the midst of it all is Ned Stark. Come what may, it is Ned who remains Robert's most reliable ally. This is also the case in the canon, but there Ned arrives in the capital, at an invitation to join a system that is already in place. In our version, Ned perhaps becomes the very person upon whom the entire structure rests. The king's right hand, without a throne, without a proper court. Now for the most paradoxical part. In our version, Ned will most likely learn the truth about Jon earlier, and under different circumstances. Because in the canon, he learnt it from the dying Lyanna in the Tower of Joy. This happened during the war. The war took place in our version too. The Tower of Joy exists in our version as well. So Ned found out anyway. But then everything changes. In the canon, Ned had a clear plan: to keep quiet, raise Jon as his own bastard, and take no risks. In our version, with the chaos, the lack of a stable capital, and questions surrounding Robert's heir, this secret Targaryen in Winterfell becomes a potential political time bomb much sooner. It would seem that the story is heading towards a fragmented Westeros, with no center of gravity and no dominant house. And that is true. But here is what makes the next move unpredictable. Others, the White Walkers, the threat from the north. In the canon, they slowly awaken over the course of all 5 books, whilst Westeros is preoccupied with its wars. The Long Night knows nothing of the political games played by men. It does not care who sits on the Iron Throne. In our version of Westeros, the threat from the north is met in a fundamentally different situation. There is no single capital. There is no unified chain of command. The Night's Watch still exists, but its funding depends on the king, who himself is in a state of perpetual crisis. The Great Lords have grown unaccustomed to obeying a single center of power, because that center has, quite literally, gone up in flames. When the first reports of the White Walkers reach the so-called Storm's End, where Robert has set up a temporary court, the situation is as follows. Dorne is hostile. The Lannisters are weak. The Greyjoy Rebellion has either just been quelled or is still smoldering. There is not a single piece of Valyrian steel to be found, save for the Stark's ice and a few scattered family heirlooms. Drakenstein still lies somewhere in a smithy, but without Tywin, who, in the canon, had ice reforged into 2 swords, the Lannisters possess neither the Guardian nor the Oathkeeper. The most bitter paradox of this version of the story lies in the following. In the canon, Jaime killed Aerys, and it looked like a betrayal. Ned condemned him. The whole world condemned him. But it was precisely this betrayal that kept Westeros alive just long enough for it to eventually unite against the others. Without that murder, there would have been no Tywin to maintain the political balance. There would not have been enough gold to feed the armies. There would have been no stable system of government. There would not even have been King's Landing itself as a focal point around which to organize a defense. In our version, the world is all the richer for Jaime's righteousness. He is no regicide. He is a knight who honored his oath to the very end. Yet this righteous knight, true to his word, left Westeros in ruins. a land that 30 years on would face an army of the dead without a single center of authority. Justice comes at a high price. Let's get back to Daenerys, because in any version of the story, she will arrive. It's not a question of if, but of when, and in which world she will find herself. In our version, Daenerys Targaryen grows up in Essos, knowing that her father burned 500,000 people to death and perished in the same fire, that her legacy is not just 3 dragons and Targaryen blood. It is the ashes of what was once the greatest city in Westeros. How does this change her? One of the key driving forces behind Daenerys' character in the canon is her passionate desire to reclaim what has been lost. The Red Keep, the Iron Throne, home. My family built this throne to unite the world. In our version, the throne melted in emerald fire even before she was born. There is no home. There is nothing to reclaim. There is only what can be built from scratch. This is a fundamentally different Daenerys, less obsessed with symbols, perhaps less prone to the tragic arc we saw in the 8th season, when everything around her was crumbling, and the symbols she so desperately wanted to achieve turned to ashes. Because in our version, the ashes were always there. She grew up with them. But note this. In our version, she also knows that it was her father's wildfire that destroyed the capital. That her father shouted, "Burn them all," and got exactly that. A fire that burned everyone, including himself. Daenerys, having grown up with this knowledge, sees her dragons differently. Fire is not just power and freedom. It is also what killed her father. It is his final legacy. Here we can touch upon a theory being discussed within the fan community. The Daenerys of the books is portrayed as someone who is increasingly drawn to images of fire and destruction, who is aware of this herself, and who struggles against it. I don't want to be your father. In our version, this fear would be more concrete, because the fear would have a concrete face, 500,000 tons of ash where King's Landing once stood. Would this Daenerys have been the best ruler, or the worst? It's hard to say, but she would have been different. And perhaps it is precisely that difference that would have saved the world, or destroyed it even faster. In the canon, in Season 8, when Drogo sets King's Landing alight, his fire triggers the last wildfire caches laid by Aerys. Green flames burst forth beneath the feet of the living city. The daughter follows in her father's footsteps. It is one of the most harrowing visual parallels in the entire series. In our version, there is no such rhyme, because the father has already done it himself. The green fire burned out a generation ago. Now as to why Martin chose the canonical version. Why does Jaime kill Aerys? The simplest answer is, because without that murder, there is no story. There would be no Lannisters in power, no Cersei on the throne, and no War of the Five Kings as we know it. The entire political structure of Game of Thrones rests on the fact that Tywin survived and exploited someone else's war to his own advantage. But there is a deeper answer. Martin wrote the murder of Aerys as a thought experiment about the cost of reputation. Jaime did the right thing and looks like a traitor. Ned did a noble thing, condemning Jaime without a trial, and looks like a hero. But Ned was wrong. His sense of honor prevented him from hearing out the explanation. And that very honor will be his undoing a few years later. This is one of the central themes of the entire saga. Good deeds do not always appear good. Bad deeds do not always appear bad. A false reputation kills just as surely as a sword. Please note, in the 3rd book, Jaime tells Brienne the truth whilst in a feverish delirium at Harrenhal. This is the first time he has spoken about it to anyone out loud. In nearly 20 years, he wasn't trying to justify himself. He wasn't seeking a reputation. Martin stated quite clearly in an interview that, for him, Jaime's story is about whether redemption is possible and what redemption means. A man who saved 500,000 people, yet is hated by everyone, is a very concrete test of what Westeros values, words or deeds. And Westeros answers unequivocally, words, because Westeros looks at form, not substance. In our alternative take on this theme, there is no such thing. Jaime is an honorable knight without a moral burden, but the world has gone to ruin. And this is where Martin poses a question that has no answer. Which is better, an honorable world in ruins, or a world that has survived, built on betrayal? There is also a parallel with real history. Martin's Westeros is largely inspired by the War of the Roses, the 15th century English Civil War between the Yorks and the Lancasters. But the scene with the Mad King, specifically, is something else entirely. It touches more closely on historical questions about dictators whom nobody stopped in time, about people who could have pressed the button or not, and pressed it, about what happens to cities that are unlucky. Martin has made his own Jaime, a man hated for doing the right thing, a mirror of these questions. What does it mean to break an oath for the sake of lives? What does it mean to keep an oath at the cost of innocent lives? It is worth noting that there is a slight discrepancy in the details of this scene between the books and the series. In Martin's books, Jaime kills Rossart near a side gate, then returns to the throne room and kills Aerys as he tries to flee. In the series, this is shown somewhat differently, in a more condensed manner. The essence remains the same, but the details are important. It is precisely the sequence of first eliminate the executor, then the king, that suggests Jaime was thinking pragmatically, rather than simply lashing out in a fit of murderous rage. In the canon, Jaime breaks his oath and saves 500,000 people. In our version, he keeps his oath and wipes them out. Martin made exactly the choice the story needed, because a true knight amidst the ruins does not lead to the kind of story Martin wanted to tell. Here is the full picture. Jaime does not kill Aerys. Rossart sets fire to the first cache. A wildfire spreads throughout the city. 500,000 people perish. Tywin and his army perish alongside them. The Red Keep and the Iron Throne are reduced to ashes. Robert wins the war and is left with a wasteland. Furthermore, without Tywin, the Lannisters rapidly lose their political influence. Jaime goes from being a knight of the Kingsguard to Lord of Casterly Rock, but not the kind of lord his father was. Cersei does not marry Robert. Robert has neither a suitable heir, nor a financial cushion, nor a ready-made capital. Stannis grows in strength and establishes a firm foothold at court. Dorne demands blood for Elia and her children. Westeros enters the next generation fragmented and without a center. In this version, Jaime lives as an honorable man. No one calls him the Kingslayer. No one spits in his wake. He did not bear the moral burden that reshaped his soul in the canon. He never met Brienne. He never lost his hand. He did not find himself through humiliation and pain. He simply ruled Casterly Rock, raised his heirs, and died in his bed. A flawless knight with clean hands, and millions of dead at the foundation of his reputation. Daenerys, had she been born, would have grown up with a different view of her heritage. Her father is no martyr. He is an arsonist who was consumed by his own flames. The Iron Throne, which she strives for in the canon, is not a symbol of a lost dream. It is a piece of molten metal in the ashes. The Targaryen pattern, the coin that always lands on one of two sides, in our version, revealed its terrible face immediately, without delay. And the daughter knew this from birth. Others enter the world without a single command structure, without a major city to serve as a gathering point, and without a political system capable of uniting the Seven Kingdoms swiftly. And the answer to the question of whether humanity will survive is becoming even less clear. I believe that in this version of the story, the odds are stacked against the people. Not because Jaime did anything wrong, but because doing the right thing and doing what saves the world are not one and the same. And Martin knew this from the very beginning. That is why he wrote the Kingslayer exactly as he did. Not a villain, not a hero. A man who did a dishonorable deed for the right reason, and whom the world hated for it. And a world that hates its saviors is a theme that runs like a thread through all the books. 500,000 people. Jaime saved them all with a single stroke of his sword. The world called him a traitor. And therein lies perhaps the most bitter lesson of Martin's universe. Sometimes reputation matters more than the truth. Sometimes words matter more than deeds. Sometimes the man who saved everything dies in the eyes of the people as a traitor. And the man who allowed that salvation to happen might have died a righteous man amidst the ashes. Let us know in the comments what you would do if you were in Jaime's shoes. Keep your promise or break it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis.